I'm Dawn Monroe. I'm a longtime technical educator. I'm a certified Microsoft Office specialist, master level, and every year I end up teaching some sessions to new college hires or interns that are working a summer job, and we have to dive deep into Excel. Because you know what? Those classes you took in school don't always cover everything you need to know when you get into the business workplace. So I'm just going to go through all of that. You can hang out and grab whatever makes sense for you. Anyway, I hope this helps. So I'm going to kick it off with a just a summary of what I think you need to know about. So, dealing with data is one of the issues that I see a big problem with, dates and problems separating text, things like that. Also, functions, charting, and for sure, some pivoting. What I'm going to start with first is dealing with the data. So we'll do dates, conditional formats, data validation, and lookups. We'll jump on over now, and I've got a link to the file in the comments there, so you can find this. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is take a look at these dates. What happens with a lot of organizations is that they are keeping track of data in some other kind of system. And when they download their data from that system, the dates come in looking weird. Now, here's the trick about it. All the dates have a serial number behind the scenes, and that's how we can do math based on dates. But you may want to fix it so you can see the real date. So, what I'll have you do, if you're playing with this file with me, go ahead and select those dates that have come in as a weird number. And on the Home tab, go to General in that formatting type, and I want you to switch it to short date. Just use that drop down. When you do that, you'll see that right away it takes that number and converts it into a date that you can read, that you're used to reading. And this is going to be super, super helpful for you. Many times the dates come in converted to that general format, and it's simply a formatting issue that you can fix it. A few other things on dates. My favorite keystroke is Control semicolon, which puts in today's date. When you do today's date, and by the way, if you don't know, the hashtags there mean that your column's too skinny. You can grab and stretch that out manually, or double click the border and it will fit the widest thing it finds in that column. Let's give it plenty of space there. So I use that one a lot. That is what I'm going to use when I'm entering dates and the date is today and it's going to stay that date. I'm not going to change it. If I ever want to use today's date, but I want it to be always updating, picking up whatever computer date, so each day I open the file, it is referring to that, I'm going to use a function called equal today. And all it has in it is an open and close parentheses. There's nothing inside the parentheses. This one is what they call volatile. It's always changing. And I'm going to hit enter or drop that in by hitting the check mark there on my formula bar. So those two things look the same, but tomorrow when I get into this one in column C, it's just like I typed it in. It's going to be still 528. If I get into this tomorrow and look at what I put in column G, that one is going to update to the next day and the next day and the next day. Now that's important because if you have something important coming up and you are trying to calculate based on days, you're going to want to use the equal today so that you're calculating like how many days past due on the invoices or something like that. So let's pick a date in the future. Let's do 10/03/2024. Say something is happening that day. So what you can do is do math based on that. Equals this date minus this date. Let me pause for a second. So we start with the equal sign. We're just using the cell references with those dates in them. But because that serial number is behind the scene of those date cells, it can calculate that I've got 128 days until we reach October 3rd from the 28th. Okay, few other things. If you are copying dates, use that fill handle and you can pull it down. It will normally do a series with dates. If you don't want a series and you wanted a copy, as soon as you do the fill down procedure, go ahead and click on that box and change to copy cells. Then you can fill a whole bunch of days with this actual date. Other things you might want to know how to do, you can do equal year. And this one's kind of tricky. If you type the formulas and functions in like I'm doing here, it's not enter to pick it. You can double click on it and then pick on that date. So equal year, open parentheses, G3. And you do not have to close the parentheses. Excel will do that part for you. So there I can extract out the year. Let's extract out the month. Again, double click or tab. Pick that. And there we're extracting out the month and equal day. There are tons of date functions that you'll find, and you'll do a little research on that and pick ones that make sense for you and things that you need to do. Okay, with conditional formatting, what I want to do is to select cells that meet a condition and change what those cells look like. So it's really easy for me to see what's happening with those cells. For instance, I want to select cells in this total column. Now you could just drag your mouse down and select it. A couple of tricks for you. If you use Control Shift down arrow while you're clicked on the first cell, it will go all the way down until it meets a blank. Some people also might select the first cell and then hold Shift and click the last cell. That's another way to select all those cells. Once you've got your cells selected, these are the ones I want to look at them and figure out if they meet a condition. Can I go ahead and highlight those or make them a different format? So here are some of our options. I'm going to say greater than, let's say, I'll give it a number. Let's say 7,000. Okay, so as I type in a number there, you'll see that it's starting to preview that for me. I'm not locked in on those colors, although I tell you, Excel loves stoplight colors, so green, yellow, red, but you're not limited there. You can go into custom format, you can pick a fill color, and you can pick whatever color you want. Whatever makes sense for what you're doing. You can even get in the color wheels. You're not locked down on that. So that's one kind of thing you can do. What's nice is that these are dynamic. So as the numbers change and this has math associated with it, that is going to automatically dynamically change to the color if it begins to meet that condition. Now let's go ahead and select these again, go back into conditional formatting and shop around. So there's a lot happening in here. I did greater than, you could do less than, between, equal to. You can search for text. You can find dates. You can even find duplicates. And this has been handy to me when I've copied and pasted and then I can't remember, did I already copy those over? If I turn on the duplicate values for a unique column, then I can see if I accidentally did that. Now, rolling up and back over, you can do top 10, top 10%. Now, these are adjustable. So if I say I want the top 10%, I can actually adjust this so that it's 15% or 20% or down to, let's say, 5%. So you can do that kind of thing in here as well. You get to make choices. I'm going to cancel that and take you back in. That's top and bottom rules. It will even calculate averages, and it can highlight above average or below average. I like data bars. This is kind of fun. It will look at the top number and the bottom number in your set, and it will make a little bar chart right in the cell overlapping with the data. That's kind of cool. It also has something called color scales, and this is taking a 3-color set pattern like the green, the yellow, the red, like stoplights, and then it's doing variations of those colors in between. This one is really busy for my brain. But if you do sort and organize, then it gives you a very nice kind of color palette there. And the ones I like better are the ones that are a single color that goes kind of dark to a light. Other things you can do, this is fun. You can actually put little graphics right in the cell, right beside your number, and you can see those graphics displaying there. This is nice if you really want a visual there. So all kinds of ways you can do this. Now, these are the automated ones. You can also create a new rule from scratch, but all of those top, let's see, the top 5 are all in that menu. You could get started that way. This is the only one that's really, really manual where you need to set up a formula to handle something. But all the rest of these you could start and you could pick the options you want or just pick it from the menu. They're already built in. Other things in there, you can clear the rules from here, and if you need to go in and see what rules you applied, you'll go all the way into Manage Rules, and you'll end up seeing any rules that you applied in order in here. The top rule takes precedence. So if you were to need to change the order of these or change the range of the cells, anything like that, this is where you come to do that. Okay, that's your jump start on conditional formatting. I hope that helps. Let's go on to data validation. Data validation is allowing me to set some criteria on what gets entered in the cell. So if I'm concerned that people are doing entry on my worksheets and they have been very sloppy about it, maybe I want to give them a drop down right in the cell so that they can only pick the things that I am giving them a choice for. So what I'll do here, I'm selecting just these light blue ones under yes, no. And this is found on the Data tab. And this is in the Data Tools group. It is Data Validation. Go ahead and jump all the way into that menu. Now for this one, I am going to give Excel a list. And I can choose a list here from this drop down. It's got lots of choices. There are actually many variations of this, but I'm going to make a list. And a little hint for you, if your list is short, you could simply type it in. Yes, comma, no. Easy breezy. Exempt, comma, non-exempt. Hourly, comma, salaried. You could do short lists like that, and it would be easy to manage in here. If you have a longer list, you're going to go out and select a range, and the range could live on this sheet. It could live on a different sheet. It could live in a different workbook. But keeping it easy here, here's my list divided by commas. Now, you might want an input message here So I'll just to show you what it is. Welcome. Please select from my list. And then an error, you get 3 levels of an error. So if you really don't want them making any changes on their own, do the stop error. The warning error is going to allow it to pause and give them a warning, but it will still let them make a change, even if you have a list there. And the information is just giving the information, but it definitely lets them make a change. I will put error here. Please choose from my list. And okay, so you can see what it's like. So when I click on one of those cells, there is my input message in the yellow. Here I'm clicking, there's the yes, and here's the no. Let's type something that's not on the list, and that is an error alert with the stop level turned on. Let's do a couple of other variations of the data validation. I'm going to select these orange cells. And what I'll do here, again, go to data validation, jumping all the way in. It's left me on error alert where I was last time, so I'm returning to settings. I'm going to pick from a list. This time I'm going to use this list over here. Now, the list can be on the same sheet. It could be on a different sheet in the same workbook. It could be coming from a whole nother file workbook. But I'm going to have that thing open, whatever it is, click in the source area, and then select that list. I like to add a couple of extra cells in case my list changes, which a lot of times they do. I'm actually going to come out and color those so you'll see how they act next time. And then if you wanted an input message, it is optional, and the error message is optional. So I'll just say okay there. And now you'll see when I go to my list, I can pick from it. You'll notice that it's got a blank down there. I actually picked my range all the way to here. Let's color it. This is just a little helper for me so that I can see later that I included those cells in the range. So if I have an update later, that when I come back to my list, it's ready. I have it all set up. So I gave myself just a little bit of a place to grow. Okay, so that's working great. You don't always have a drop down in the cell when you set data validation. Sometimes you want to give it a range, like a number range or a date range, before this, after that, greater than this, less than that. And so here I'll do the same thing with these light green. I will say data validation, go to settings. Let's do one here that is, let's do a whole number, a minimum of 100 and a maximum of 500. Okay. Now, if I put a number between that range, I'm good to go. It lets me. But let's say I do a number outside that range. It does not like it. It gives me a stop message. So, my friends, that is how I would use data validation. There's many, many uses for that, and I know you can get some good value out of this if you start using it. The next piece that I want to pick up with is about dealing with lookups. Many of you are going to find yourself managing a VLOOKUP function or some variety of lookup function in the work that you're doing. So I want to review formulas and functions for just a minute as we enter that. So here are two exact they do the exact same work. The formula written out, beginning with the equal sign, B2 plus B3 plus B4 plus B5 plus B6, is written out the long way. So I would call that a formula. It starts with an equal sign. It's got cell reference numbers. It's got math operators like plus, and all of that can be used in whatever combination you need. Now, there are many, many, many named functions, like the sum function. The sum is adding up all the numbers within a range. And so there you see B2 colon B6. That means the exact same thing as the formula written above. It starts with B2, it goes through B6. So those two things are doing the exact same thing. You'll find you're going to use a lot of different functions. There are probably in the neighborhood of around 500 functions now. So you'll learn the ones that you'll start seeing at the workplace, and that's where you will begin your journey. Many people use about, I don't know, 5 to 10 different functions in their workplace. It just depends on their job role. So let's dust off the math brain for just a little bit. Please excuse my dear Aunt Sally. At some time, some point in your schooling, a teacher tried to teach you this, and I'm just going to refresh your memory on it. This is the math order of operations. And if you learn this and you recall this, what you'll figure out is that this is the way that Excel also does the math. So if we set up our math so that Excel can read it this way, that makes the most sense and you'll get the result that you want. And the reason that we often see problems with this, I guess what I want to say is the main takeaway I want you to take away from this is that parentheses come first. And here's a very simplified example for you. In the top result, what we see is that we have parentheses around 3 plus 7. So that comes first. That equals 10. The asterisk means multiply in Excel. So multiply times 2, that gives us a 20. If you do not put a parentheses around there, what happens is that it goes by the order of operations, and you'll see that multiply comes before addition. So when you get back to that and there is no parentheses on the bottom one, what it does first is it multiplies first, 7 times 2. And then it adds the 3 last. So I would just remind you, parentheses come first in your order of operations when you're doing handwritten math and when you need to do it in Excel. I think you will find that most helpful. Okay, I'm going to escape out of there and bring you back to our workbook file. I hope you've got it open and are playing along. This is a sample that I really, really liked. This is from John at Excel Campus. I love his example. It makes such good sense because you are already doing VLOOKUPs all the time. You vertically look up and down the first column of a menu, for instance, a Starbucks menu, and when you find the coffee that you want, you go over to the column and the size of what drink you would like. And so you are vertically going through, finding a match for what you want, and then moving over in that row to find that particular cost. That's how Excel is doing a vertical lookup as well. There's many types of lookups. Vertical is one. There's a horizontal. There is also now an X lookup. There is also, some people use a index and match. That is another way to do it. So I'm just going to focus on the VLOOKUP. It's very popular, and we'll walk through that one together. So here I took the Starbucks example and I actually set it up so that you could play with it. So what it's doing is looking down, down, down that first column. It's looking for the cell, whatever I put in A16, which is this cafe mocha, it finds that in the first column of this red block, the array. Once it's found that match, then we've asked it to go over 3 columns to the grande size. And then the word false is telling it it must be an exact match. So cafe mocha would have to be typed exactly or it will not find it. So that's kind of there's some tricky parts in there. The first many times you'll do this, you'll look up an example because you will not remember how to do this. Once you kind of get the feeling for it, you'll be able to do this quicker and quicker and quicker. I'm going to go on here to the VLOOKUP, and I'm blocking my own example there. Let me get out of the way, get out of my own way. What I've done here is I've just set up, this is just made up data, but I think you can understand it pretty well. You've got each of these rows has a region. And over here in the region, we are looking at the region, and in this little table array, it has one column with the region and one column that indicates a tax rate. Okay. Here, I want to pull that information based on whatever I have in the region. I want to look it up over here and return the correct tax rate into my spreadsheet so I can continue calculating and finish my work. So what I'll do here is begin with the VLOOKUP. Now, there are a lot of ways to get started on this. I'll take you this way. I'll go to the Formulas tab, and there is something called the Lookup and Reference section. It's one of the function libraries, and I know that in there lives the VLOOKUP. And I'm doing a VLOOKUP because vertical stands for looking in that first vertical column. Okay, so let's go part by part and fill this in and get this working. So my lookup value that I want to look up, just focus on the first row, is what I have in cell B2. Easy enough. My table array is going to be this piece over here. I'm not including the headings. I don't need those. I'm just getting the K2 through the L6. Now, if you see in my little cheater box down here, we do need to lock that down because if I start copying this formula down, I'll actually show you. I'll show you it misbehaving and then we'll know what to do. The column index that I want to return is looking at this little array. I have to count over how many columns I want. And what I want to bring back is from the second column. So that's the column index number. The range lookup is where you're telling it, is it an exact match or a close match? And the way you indicate an exact match is the word false. Okay, kind of tricky. You get used to doing these over time. And I'll say okay here. All right, so it has looked up our first one. Now it looks a little bit different, doesn't it? All that's happened is that it's not formatting to a percent. I'm going to change it to a percent, and I'm going to make sure that it has a couple of decimal places. That's going to be the way I want to read it. And I'll also come and drag this down and show you what my problem is. As I drag that down, what happens is that this array is moving, moving, moving. What happens when you fill down formulas or copy formulas is they move relative to their new row. Unless you say, hey, I don't want to move this part. So I'm going to escape out of there, undo that, get back in there, and what I need to do is put dollar signs in front of the K and the 2, and $ in front of the L and the 6. So I'm going to do that now. You could type it manually in there, $K, $2, or you could click anywhere on that cell reference and use your keyboard, use the function key, F4. That will cycle through the $. That's called an absolute value. And think of it this way. With the B2, that's a relative value. I want it to change every time I copy to its new row. With the $ in there, that's an absolute value. I do not want that to change even when I copy this formula. So I'm going to drop it in there. And now when I fill it down, it works great. I'm going to keep going. You can double click that to autofill all the way down your column. Now you're ready to go. Now you can do the rest of your work equals this times this. Got it? And then you do equals the subtotal plus the tax. Got it? Those are good. Fill that on down and fill that on down. And we're getting an error there. It's worried for us. It says to me, hey, it's an inconsistent formula. I'm going to go ahead and select all the way down, Control Shift arrow down. And then I'm going to go ahead. Oh, I gave myself a long list here. Let's fix it. Let's fix them all at once. Ignore error. You see how I've selected them all? Ignore it. Okay? We know what we're doing there. We don't need that. Okay, I hope that that helped clarify some of those things with a VLOOKUP. A VLOOKUP is going to be very handy looking at other sheets where you might have some data from one source, some data from another source, and you want to look things up and bring them into a singular source so that you have everything on one master sheet. You can have it in different files and look up. You can have it on different sheets and look up. In this case, I have it on the same sheet just to keep it nice and simple for this. Now, the wonderful news is that if something changes here, let's give a tax break. You won't see that often. There you go. Let's do a 4% there instead. Everywhere that I had Midwest looking up and getting 6.5%, now as soon as I typed in 4 on that table, it looked up. It's dynamic. It's continuing to happen. And now all of those will change automatically. Okay, let's put the pause on lookups and move on to our next topic. You may find yourself starting to do more with graphics and charting. This is a book that I recommend, Storytelling with Data. You can find a lot of resources online for this and with this particular author. And I hope you will dive a little deeper if you find yourself doing a lot of charting in your role. From that, let me take you on. Let's get to the good stuff. This is preparing to pivot your data into data summaries. A pivot table is a summary of your big list of data. And there are many, many great uses for this once you start using Excel. And so I want to get you ready for this. The first thing we're going to do is start working with tables because tables are a significant, they're the best practice for getting to good pivot tables. And I'll tell you all about that. We really want to automate things. We want to get things flowing into our charts and into things that we can be interactive with. This is a sample little dashboard that we can set up and have interactive while we're in meetings. And I know you're going to want to be able to do things like that yourself. So heading back over to our Excel data, let's start playing with these. I've got a setup for you here on the Table to Pivot tab. Go ahead and join me there if you're playing along. Now here we have a set of data. I tried to keep it simple because I wanted to show you how you might do this in a method that you could take it, process what's happening, and then go on to your much more complex data sets. So I bet a lot of you have started going the data tab and turning on a filter. Anybody's done that? I bet a lot of you have. What that does is it gives a little drop down handle at the top of each row here, of each column rather, and you can do your sorting, you can do your filtering, you've got a search box, and you've got little check boxes to help you with the filtering. So sorting is organizing it in order, whether A to Z or date order or number order. And filtering is picking out just certain records that make sense to what you're searching. Now I'm going to uncheck that filter. I want to show you another way to do this. And let me point out that the way my data is set up, I've got each row is one record. So the first row is the header row. I don't skip any row, and then I go row, row, row. That's all transactional data. So that's the best way to set up your data. Then you can turn on something called a table. If you go to the Home tab and you go Format as a Table, you could pick one of these colors. It looks like you're just setting up colors for your sheet, but you're doing more than that. I'll just pick one here. First off, it recognizes that you've got a table. If you had any blank rows, it might accidentally stop too soon. So be very careful. You want to eliminate blank rows. Yes, my table has headers. Okay, that's that first row. What it did was it turned on those same exact data filters that we saw earlier. But what it did was it gave you a table design tab on the ribbon. Now, this has all kinds of extra features to it that I think you're going to want to use. Now, of course, you can see there that I can change color. That would be very cool, right? I can come in and change to different settings in here at a whim. But I also want to point out you've got these check boxes here for different table styles. So the heading row's an on-off switch. Don't do that. It just makes it white. You can't see it. You can do a fancy first column, a fancy last column. In the case here, it's making them bold, but if you get into those styles, you see some of them have like a different fill color, and you just turn those off and on if you want to kind of highlight that column. It only has first and last column. The filter button is your on-off switch for the drop downs. And the banded rows is the every other row coloring. You can also do a banded column. You can check both. It's messy. But I do like the banded every other row because that helps me visualize each row of data. Now, extra nice here is the total row. When I click the total row, it kicks me down to the bottom. Now, again, if you click off of this, you lose that table design tab. So if you've lost it, click on it. There you check the total row, and it kicks you down here. What you can do is turn on your favorite functions directly in the total row. So I could do something like a count. I could do an average. I could do an average. It usually does the sum automatically on the final column if it has numbers in it. So with that total row turned on, this becomes really, really helpful. You can get into any of these. Let's do a filter for just cameras and okay. And let's say cameras in the, let's do the northeast. Okay. 4. And there's my averages for those, and there's my total. You see that you are getting some clues that you're in a filtered environment. You see the bright blue numbers show you're filtered. Down here at the bottom by ready, it says 4 out of 80. You can see little funnels here that show that you're filtered and filtered on those columns. Okay, little hint for you. If you are doing a lot of this and you filter by multiple columns, use this clear button on the data tab and even right click it and add it to your quick access toolbar. That will clear all of your filters all at once. Let me use it now. I have 2 filters on. Clear filter, everything's back. Okay. The reason I would set up a table first is because when I add new rows to my data set here, it's going to pick them up as part of the table, and then the pivots will refresh off the entire table with the new data. Otherwise, I have to keep coming in and fixing my range every time I get new data, and that I'm not going to like. Okay, so just to clarify what I'm saying, by the way, look, headings roll up. I don't have to freeze anymore when I'm in a table. Let's say I'm going to copy in some new data. All I would do is come and turn off that total row. Let's just pretend like these are new. Copy, paste. When I paste new data, these include automatically to my table. What's going to happen next is that I pivot this into a summary, and all I have to do is come up and say data refresh all, and everything that works off this table is going to be updated and synced up. That's why I turn on a table. Okay, so taking this next step, I just copied and pasted some things in there, so a few extra rows. You could turn on that total row again. It's going to update with, instead of 80 records, I've got 84 records. Let's do a couple of things to make this extra. With the table, first of all, one thing I'm going to like is turning on a slicer. A slicer is a way to have a filtering system with a little button bar. So anything that are good categories are going to be great here. Quarter, region, product name, those are all good categories. And so what I'm starting to do is make myself a little fancy dashboard. Okay, you can move these around, resize them. When you're on a slicer, you get slicer tools, so you could make these pretty, make them match. And what I'm going to do now is, instead of coming in here and choosing a quarter, what I'm going to do here is choose it from this little button slicer. You picking it up? This works like the filters in here. So now you can use these little slicer buttons. It's going to make life really, really easier. And you can just do it live. And you can say, oh, I want to see Northeast, second quarter, just the desktops. Clear the filter, clear the filter, clear the filter. Okay, so start playing with those slicers. Now take this the next step. Table design, you're on your data somewhere, summarize with a pivot table. This is where it feels a little crazy to people. You're taking this table of data to a new worksheet, say okay, and now let me move myself out of the way. Let me find a place to go. How about down here? What this pivot table fields is a list of all my headings. Over here on the left, this is where I start to design how I want the data to appear. Let me do it just this way. If you click the checkbox for region, you'll see that it starts to build the regions in the rows. And now region populates in this little quadrant area where it says rows. Let's say I want quarter in the columns. And let's say I want total sales in the values. You see me there, I'm also doing a drag motion. You could check the box and let Excel put it where it thinks you want it, or you can manually grab them and drag them in the place you want them. So what I've done here without any math is that I have started to build basically a cross-tab query here where I've got the regions and I've got the quarters and it's totaling each of those individually. This is Q1 of the Midwest. Here is Q2 of the Southwest. Okay. Then you start manipulating these because you have questions when you're doing business about what that big list of data is telling you. As you come up with the questions, you start building your pivots so that they answer the questions of your data. So maybe my first question is, how's each region doing on a quarterly basis? Let me take quarter and drag it and drop it under region. This becomes now kind of a playground where you're going to start dragging these things around and experimenting to get the look and feel that you want for your data. Maybe you decide you don't want quarter in there. Maybe you want product name under region. Maybe you don't like that. You decide, well, I just want by each region, and maybe I want to add a chart to it. Now, you'll see that when you're on a pivot table, that's what this is called, then you get pivot table analyze, pivot table design up on your tabs on your ribbon. Let's go to pivot table analyze and turn on a pivot chart that matches. Let's get it where I can click it. That matches that data. Now you'll begin pulling out all the different ways that you want to look at this. You'll begin doing things like adding slicers in here. You can also add slicers. What you're starting to build here is a very functional dashboard that answers questions about your data set. Now, I know I'm putting these too close together. It won't work great for me, but just so you get an idea, these things are tied together so I can see how did things go in Q2. Clear it. What about laptops? Okay. So as you build out your master list, that's still over here, by the way. Table to pivot is exactly how I left it. The sheet has been created that is doing the pivoting for you. Friends, start with something like this. Play around with a simple set of data. Try some experiments with it to get it how you want it. A couple of things that I would point out. There's a lot to pivots. You're going to keep going on your learning here, but this is to get you started. With your pivots tables, you'll start adding all these different things. Maybe you want a timeline in there. If you have a date column, you can do a timeline. Okay. With a timeline, you can set up by years, quarters, months, dates. Okay. You can then use that for filtering. I want to see just Q2. Clear it. I want to see Q1. Clear it. Okay. Maybe you decide that you're going to want some formatting on these numbers. You're going to start learning how to go in and format these. I'll go number format to a currency and OK. Things of that nature. And then down here on the bottom, You've got filter, which is a top level filter. You can actually put something at the top. Let's do a quarter at the top filter. This allows you to filter from the very top level and then have different data displayed in the pivot table itself. We'll add product name over there. As I start adding more and more things to this, you see that I have to get picky about how I put my data together. I need to space things and give it room to grow. So you'll experiment with that and you'll figure out what's going to work best for you. And then each of these things, as you get into them, there's going to be field settings with each one. And I'll take you for a peek under here. You'll be able to adjust how each of these work. And especially when you get into the math part, you'll see down here in the sum, you can go into value field settings. And here you can change how you are summarizing data. Maybe you need averages or percents or something like that. Maybe you need to set up some kind of percent of a grand total. This goes on and on. There's a lot of learning to do here, but this is intended to get you started and get you ready for some of the things that you're going to see as you work an internship or you're a new hire at a company that is really engaged with their Excel work. Okay, my friends, I'm going to wrap up here. We've done plenty. If you need something special, then be sure and drop it in the chat, and I'd be happy to respond to you. Have a great, great day. Please stay in touch with me. I would love to get to know you. Let me bring this up. There we go. And this is me. I would love to get to know you. Dawn Monroe, be sure and subscribe, and we will talk another time. Thanks so much. Have a great day.